Hi, good evening. Welcome to today's session on the unit Personal and Professional Development. We're looking at continuing our journey on this with regards to the coverage on Learning Outcome 2. And we'll look at some of the things that, they are discussed as given out in the assessment criteria. So I think just a quick recap in terms of what we've covered so far in terms of this session 1. What we did in session 1 was to try and understand how do we look at self-managed learning. We looked at the advantages and disadvantages of self-managed learning for an individual and for an individual within the organization. And then to a certain extent, we also referred to certain key theoretical frameworks like the Klopp's learning cycle, and then also discuss what are the benefits both from a personal and professional context, and why why managed learning and lifelong learning are important from an organizational perspective. Now, in Learning Outcome 2, we are going to extend our understanding of what we've covered in terms of self-managed learning and lifelong learning into understanding how do we look at taking up the responsibility to own our personal and professional development when we work within a business or an organization. And here, in order to cover the learning outcome, what we are going to be looking at studying is talking about, basically looking at coverage about, things like how do we evaluate our own skills, competencies, and then benchmark them against the professional standard and also organizational standards and requirements. We'll also look at, in a bit of a detail with regards to the example of, how do we look at developing once you've identified the skills that you need or the competencies you need, how do we look at developing those skills and competencies is what we'll also look at briefly. And then once we've identified these opportunities that need development or which basically are required when you work within an organization, what we want to be able to do is at some stage from the skills audit, the areas that we picked up in terms of skills that we need and the audit that we've done, what we want to be able to do is put that into some sort of a plan, which will basically be a developmental plan for us. And that developmental plan would both define those needs or skills and, the competencies that we need from a point of view of both present and future perspectives. So what we are looking at essentially is firming that up into something called a PDP or a personal development plan. Now, when you work within organizations, that terminology might be slightly different, and it will be called a continuous professional development plan, or CPD as we call it. And the idea is that most organizations maintain a CPD plan for employees so that they are current and up to date with the skills and competencies required to be able to perform in their roles. Now, the development of PDP, it's a working document essentially, and then what happens at some stages, you make that document, you keep doing regular updates onto that, and then at some stage that document could also be reviewed by your line manager, or it could also be looked into by the department head or the HR in order to see how you're progressing on with the development of these skills and competencies. So let's get into understanding a bit more in terms of details of what we are looking at covering today in Outcome 2. First of all, I think what I'll do is we'll take you through, my idea is to primarily take you through a bit of a presentation in terms of talking about the concept of, development. And here, the concept that we are going to be referring or alluding to would be primarily, continuous development. So let's look at a few slides in terms of covering and starting off with the definition of personal development. Now, in most cases, when we look at this particular word personal and development, what we are looking at is relating to the fact that we are looking at, things which are personal to ourselves in terms of both skills or competencies, and the development aspect of it is to kind of look at some of those skills or developing those skills and areas that we need essentially to perform our duties or roles and responsibilities. So personal development would include activities that improve awareness, they improve your identity, they help you develop your talent or your potential, and also build on the fact that they basically build on your human capital, or basically build on your existing experience which facilitates, better employment opportunities and also enhances your delivery when you work in delivery. When I say is productivity or efficiency when you work within the organization. Now, why it is personal? Because if you develop these skills, competencies, and build onto your experience, what it facilitates is better employment opportunities, which actually do a better quality of life, and also helps in the realization of your dreams and aspirations. So an example here would be that I am looking to be, say, for example, if you're working and you're employed within an organization, when you work as a manager, now in your personal development plan or in your scheme of things, what you're looking at doing is in the next 5 to 7 years, you want to move up to be a general manager, or you want to move up to be going into management. Now, because you're looking at that particular target, what you're looking at doing is continuously developing yourself in terms of the areas that you need skills on or experience on, and that will help you in the long run to realize your dream or the goal or objective which has been set to get into senior management position. So it is quite an important concept, which is what we study at this level, and this is something which then expands on to a full-fledged unit either towards the human resources development or training and development side, wherein it is a key area wherein people who work within the HR or HR related activities need to be able to instill this process of development within the employees or within the staff within an organization. A PD, personal development, when extended into some sort of a plan, or when you have some sort of a timeline against which you are going to work to improve certain things, whether it's skills, competencies, experience, practices, processes, that will then basically be extending into something called a plan, and that will be termed as PDP or personal development plan. Now, it is called also a plan of improvement. Sometimes within organizations, you also call it a plan of action. You also call it a corrective action plan, but the terminology varies because it varies according to the situation in which it is being used. But the idea central to the core is that you have a document, which is a working document, which identifies your skills, your gap areas, your weaknesses, and the threats, and that is then documented onto onto some sort of a planning document, which helps you work towards improving those skills and kind of polishing of those skills or competencies that you need. Now, the reason why this is a plan is because it's a journey document, it's a working document. It helps you, if it is created at a particular point in time, then at some time it can be reviewed. You can reflect on some of the activities, and with what you can look at is you can evaluate what successes you've got or how much progress you've made, and that is why this is a working document. Now, sometimes you think, and sometimes during performance appraisals or reviews that we look at, we tend to identify a lot of areas that are areas of gap or areas in which you do not have experience in. And this is something which is basically required, for further development, so that you as an individual are continuing to grow, but you're also picking up the skills required to be able to effectively perform in your job responsibility or your role within the organization. So existing performance evidence is not supporting, in some cases, would mean that you do not have those skills, and those are then documented into a PDP for you to be able to have a plan to work towards getting those skills or acquiring those skills. Now, sometimes when you start a plan, what will happen is you will basically start up with something in terms of basic questions, which will relate to and give you some clues in terms of how you start making this plan. So in terms of questions that we tend to ask sometimes would be things like, looking at by now in terms of the goal that you've set and what you want to achieve. Sometimes you'll also get what do I want to achieve or where do I want to be in a certain point in time. So for example, if you look at you are at an assistant manager or a manager level, where do you want to be in 2 years time, in 5 years time? And some of these questions are also asked to you when you go towards interviews within an organization. Now, when you know where you want to be and where you are now, what you want to then understand is what new skills, knowledge, attributes, experiences that you need to get to be able to get there. And then how much and what type of work would be required to get to those changes or get to acquire those skills, knowledge, and attributes. And then finally, what you also look at is things like how can you achieve those goals. So you put some SMART targets, which are, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, and then you map them against the relevant, opportunities that you want to pursue. So an example here would be that you want to say you're working within an organization and you want to work towards being a bid writer, for example. Now, as you know, bid writers have a certain amount of technical capability to be able to participate in bids, tenders, and write those documents. So what you will do is you do a current assessment using something called a skills audit template. And when you do that current assessment, it basically tells you where I am. Now, what you will do is, if you're wanting to be, say, for example, a bid writer, you are going to identify what are the key skills, which are required, what is the knowledge and experience do you require in that role, and how does your current, skill set, for example, your competencies, pair up in terms of being in that role. Now, when you look at defining some tangible parameters, what you will then do is you'll rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, and the rating will essentially provide you, some idea in terms of where you stand and how much work needs to be done. Now, when you do that skills audit, what you're effectively doing is you're answering questions like, where am I now and where do you want to be? So in the skills and knowledge that I want to acquire is what you'll put here, and again, you'll map them against, a rating scale of 1 to 5. And that will help you put some smart goals towards what you're working to be and to cover those areas by acquiring those fresh skills. Now, when we look at this as a process, it's a continuous process because you keep on basically, looking at something which is a cycle called PDCA cycle, which is plan, develop, review, and action. So PDSA or PDA, which is C, which means that you are looking at currently identifying the areas which you need development on. You're looking at planning or putting together a plan which will help you in consultation with your manager or maybe your supervisor, and then you put that plan in action. And once you put that plan in action, what you do is you need to develop or acquire some resources to be able to, acquire those. So it could be either self-study, attending some lessons, coaching or mentoring. It could be things that you're attending like training or seminars. And once you achieve that experience or that particular skill, what you do is you reflect and review with regards to what has been the outcome of that training or what has been the outcome of that mentoring or coaching which you've attended, and how has it helped you to establish or re-establish some of the future goals and objectives that you want to work towards. So the first part is identify. That means you do something called a development need analysis or skills audit, and this is what could be done through a SWOT document, which is identifying your strengths and weaknesses, and then or a skills audit document which you could use to get your audit done by, you could audit basically yourself, or the other would be to hand this document over to your peers and ask them to rate you on those parameters so that you're able to identify your areas in terms of need development. The second would be to plan, and planning is primarily looking at you're looking at prioritization of your goals. And because if you have lots of areas to improve on, you need to prioritize them in consultation with what are important areas and urgent areas and how they will be directly related to your job or your job opportunities that you need to seek or are seeking. And that is where planning comes in. Action is all about how do you go about it, what kind of say for example activities you undertake, or resources you buy or look at to be able to work through that process. So you're looking at workshops, online courses, seminars, training and development, self-study, coaching and mentoring, and these are some of the areas through which you look at putting it into action. Reflection and review is the fourth part of it, and this is important is because of the fact that when you start a journey, you go from point A to B, and what you want to be able to look at is how have you fared on that particular journey, what have been the outcomes, have those been positive, have they been able to help you re-establish some of the, say for example, areas that you wanted to achieve, or the areas in which you wanted to make improvements, have they been able to do that? And here you need to do goal setting. So in some cases, sometimes what you do is you move your goalposts so that you're continuously adjusting to be able to evaluate whether that's hitting the criteria, not hitting the criteria, and then you readjust those targets, or readjust those resources, training, whatever you're doing, to be able to kind of achieve what you've set out in the action or in the plan. Now, continuous professional development, obviously, the reason why it is called CPD or continuous professional development is because the process is ongoing. It is related directly to self-managed learning and lifelong learning. That means in any particular role that you do, at some point in time, you will need to develop, redevelop, reskill, upskill, and that is why it is important from a perspective of all organizational goals and targets which are set year on year by a manager or in the department. So in order to cover this topic, once we know that we are looking at doing in terms of learning outcome 2, this is your broad overview. These deck of slides, or a few slides, actually give you a broad overview in terms of what we are looking at covering. Now let's look at some of the functional documents which will help us cover some of these tasks and activities with regards to learning outcome 2. So the first one that we are looking at is evaluate your own skills and competencies against professional standards or organizational goals. I think what you're looking at doing is looking at this particular bit, which is to kind of understand very clearly that this is your AC 2.1. So what you're looking at doing is auditing your skills, and you're writing down your abilities and competencies on a rating scale of 1 to 5. And then below it, what you want to be able to do is slightly elaborate with that example of some of the objectives that you want to achieve and how you would go about achieving it. Now, once you've done this audit, this is what we will do is, once you've done the skills, you know what you need and what activities you need to do. What to be able to do then is basically put down some sort of a plan. And this is where what we will do is we need to identify our needs, and these needs we need to put some sort of activities that we want to be able to do against those needs. So what I would do is essentially in this task 2.2, and it says identify our developer needs and activities required to meet them. What you need to do is, here we need to identify the development, for example, needs. You need to identify own, that's the keyword, development needs, and document basically the activities which you need to do to be able to meet that target. An example that I've given here is basically somebody who's looking at say in this completing a course. As you're doing a course with me, what we are looking at doing is we're looking at completing the course in 2018. Now, how would you complete this course? By looking at getting the knowledge, attending the webinars, maybe reading books and journals, and obviously keeping yourself current and up to date with regards to the course content required to complete and submit assessments. So here what you're looking at doing is essentially, if I just change the date, looking at one of the activities, which is you're looking at getting into reading as an activity. You're going to maintain a daily log or a weekly log, which essentially allows you to monitor some of these activities that you're doing. And then in order to kind of achieve say for example the qualification, you are looking at attending the online webinars or the sessions that we are doing, and these webinars and sessions are essentially giving you an overview of the learning outcomes that you're covering with your tutor. And once you've done that, we're also looking at doing maybe some other activities which will help you in kind of developing some of the things that you want to look at. So for example, it could be voluntary work that you want to look at. It could be areas wherein you want to gain some experience related to the course that you're doing, and what you would want to do is maybe pick up, if not paid work, then voluntary work, which will allow you to build some experience as you study for this qualification. And then one of your clear goals is, once you complete, say for example, this diploma qualification, you at some stage are looking at studying further to basically top it up with a master's or a bachelor's degree. And here the idea is this document essentially helps you on a broad basis, because it's a working document, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, helps you identify your own needs, basis the plan and the targets that you've set, and the activities around which, the activities that are documented around which you, once you've covered those activities, will allow you to reach your end goal. So here, the ones that we can identify are things like you want to develop a habit of reading books and journals which are related to the course. You're looking at maintaining a monthly or a weekly log, which is some sort of a log or a diary, so that you know exactly these objectives you've completed, achieved, and met. And then in order to do that, to go through successfully through the course, you're looking at online webinars, you're looking at getting hold of some voluntary work, which will help you build some experience. And then you're keeping an eye on the ball, which is from a long-term perspective, wherein you want to look at, topping this up to a bachelor's degree at some stage, and that is where you're identifying your own needs. Now, if I have to document this into a plan, because this is identification. Now, what I've done after the next step of, after identification, what we want to be able to do is develop these identified areas that I need to develop my, improve my skills on. I need to develop them into how they would relate to my current and future needs. And that is where we do begin to see the essence of developing of a document, which is like a personal development plan. So here, what you do is just looking at a template. There are lots of templates available, but they've just adapted something from CMI, Chartered Institute of Marketing, which basically talks about how we look at, the development of some of these activities into a plan. And that means that we're looking at basically creating a PDP, talking about things like, what are the personal development goals, start date and end date in terms of milestones that you want to, name it as, what resources or activities you're going to do. So in terms of organizational resources and personal resources, let's list them out and differentiate between the two. So in terms of organizational resources, we are looking at, assuming you're looking at doing this course, which is sponsored by your employer, you're funding it yourself, what you're looking at is resources on the library side. You could be looking at resources in terms of lectures, webinars, and, discussions, professional discussions with their tutor. On the personal side, you need things which will make these, kind of activities possible. So you need maybe study material. You need to do a bit of time management. You need to arrange for finances even before you join the course. In some cases, you're looking at, even looking at basic things like the access to the internet and, those facilities in terms of infrastructure, which will help you get on with this journey. Now, what could be the problems that you can anticipate and what could be the anticipated outcomes is what could be documented in the last column. And here the idea is, if everything is going as per plan, this is what you'll end up achieving by the end date that you've set in terms of the timeline. Similarly, this then can be developed into a PDP, and because you have short-term and long-term plans, the PDP basically consists of both the short-term and the long-term plan, and it lists out your activities that you are planning around the major goals that you want to achieve, and they are documented in this particular template. So I'm going to send you a Word document of this, and the idea would be to try and develop your PDP, which will look at meeting the task 2.3 and 2.4, wherein you first develop the plan, and then at a stage later you basically create a plan which first you look at basically putting together, and once you put together a plan and document some of the activities which are required, you create that into a full deal plan with timelines, milestones, and achievable objectives, and the areas of risk which could kind of which you could encounter as you're progressing on this plan. So this bit will help us cover learning out 2, wherein essentially what we are looking at doing is understanding how self-managed learning, lifelong learning leads to the creation of something called, our identification of our own skill set, using a skills audit, that being transformed into a SWOT to identify our strengths and weaknesses, and then putting together some sort of a plan, activity plan, so that we know what we need to do using SMART goals to work towards gathering those resources or activities, and then finally putting them into an action plan which has a timeline, start and end timeline, allowing you to look at the resources, the timeline, the plan, aims and objectives, and the risks which could be associated with that plan to into a full-fledged document like a PDP. And with this, which allows us to then at some stage in Learning Outcome 3, what we will do is we will review these activities, review this plan. But in Learning Outcome 2, we are trying to learn how to look at developing this, how to do the skills audit, how to use the skills audit to do a SWOT analysis. Once you've done the SWOT analysis, how do we then put it into some sort of a activity, identify the activities required to be able to do those, basically the activities required to cover those gap areas or gain those competencies and skill, and then develop it into a holistic plan, which is called the personal development plan or personal and professional development plan. Some of them will call it CPD, continuous development plan, continuous professional development plan, and things like that. And then you basically look at the objective of how this can be documented, cover so the assessment criteria for Learning Outcome 2. Now, I'm going to keep this session brief because this is more or less a bit of a practical task, and I'm going to send you these templates that I've shown you on the session today. And these templates, hopefully should help you and crystallize, the concept of, the concept of personal and professional development. And what I would suggest you to do is to look at utilizing these templates of skills audit and identification of your own development needs and documenting those activities, and then turning them into a PDP, which we can actually use to cover Learning Outcome 3. So I'm going to stop the session here for today, and hopefully you've enjoyed the session, and some of the things that we've discussed using the presentation slides, which is covering the overview, and some of the templates that we've looked at should help you then crack on with the tasks given in the Learning Outcome 2 and meeting the assessment criteria. Now, any questions and queries, as always, more than welcome. Please drop me a quick email or give me a call, and we can discuss if there are any areas that you need additional handouts or documents on to be able to cover this learning outcome. Once again, thanks for joining the session, and I'll catch up with you next week. Take care. Thanks. Bye for now.